Hi everybody. Hope you're having a good day. I'm recording this on Thursday night, so we've just been shopping. We live life on the edge. Here we go again. We're continuing our journey with the latest installment of Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen, which is looking at our thoughts, how we think, how we have the choices associated with the things we think about. So can I ask you this? Can I start with a question? Have you ever snapped at someone, even if you're not normally snappy? You shut them down. Maybe you even think they deserved it. You knew you shut them down simply from the expression on their face. And you thought about apologizing, but your train of thought embarked on a journey of self-justification. You moved on from where you were. And you think, no, it's not needed just now. Maybe it's not such a big deal to them anyway. They'll get over it. If I go in again and apologize, I'll only be stirring things up. It'll pass. They'll forget it all. So you give yourself some grace. And you tell yourself, look, I was tired and what they said wasn't helpful. And at the end of the day, my own self-esteem is more important than all this anyway. So let's just move on. Let's move on. I thought that, I'll be honest, on occasion. But thinking this way, that building our own personal self-esteem is a good and valid guide for our life is just a lie. Maybe that's why Paul told us not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to, but to honor others above ourselves. So for me, it might be for you as well, this is another challenge for me in the way that I think. Can we get to that place where we see ourselves as less important than we believe we are and actually really put others first? Yeah, it's tough. It's actually called humility. Now, a famous writer from the 19th century, I apologize, called Andrew Murray says this: the question is often asked how we can count others better than ourselves when we see that they are far below us in wisdom and in holiness and in grace received. That's from a book published in 1884 called Humility. And he really gets to the point. It's about our pride. I am right, they are wrong, I'm not that bad. But here's where it starts to get complicated, folks, and really challenging. Jesus comes to earth in human form. He lives a flawless life. He has no deceit on his lips. He's done nothing wrong. And then when standing in front of those who reviled him and accused him falsely, what does he do? He does nothing. Remember this verse from Peter, 1 Peter 2:23. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Whoa, this is the way of humility, and it's incredibly hard to do. It's really tough. I find it so hard. But when it comes to our thoughts, it comes down to choices again. We're tempted to use busyness to distract us from dealing with a situation. We instead can choose to be still with God and reconfigure our thinking. Maybe this is another tool in shifting the way we think. Humility. What is humility? It's described as having a modest or a low view of one's importance. Sorry, this is a hard one. This is really hard one for me. Why is it hard? Well, today we're fed a continuous message of how much we matter, how important we are. And we suck in and believe every word of it. But we're told as Christians to pick up our cross and follow Jesus. Yet everything in us will fight against it. Everything. But what's the reality here? Is it the more self-esteem I have, the better life will go for me? Or the more I choose God and others over myself, the more joyful I will be? It says in the Bible that Jesus, being found in human appearance as a man, humbled himself by becoming obedient even to death on a cross. That's Philippians 2:8. The challenge here is that the first statement is a lie and the second one is the truth. But being humble is so hard as we fight our instincts all the way to get there. And I laugh, I sometimes think, who said being a Christian is easy? It's really tough. And this next passage, again written by Andrew Murray from that book, or he's supposed to have quoted this from the book. When you step up and read it, what do you think? How do you respond to this? This is what he says. Humility is the perfect quietness of heart. This is the challenging bit. It is to expect nothing, to wonder at nothing that is done to me, to feel nothing done against me. It is to be at rest when nobody praises me and when I'm blamed and despised. It is to have a blessed home in the Lord where I can go and shut the door and kneel to my Father in secret, and I'm at peace as in a deep sea of calmness when all around and above is in trouble. Hang on, let's just process that. This is so difficult. It's impossibly opposite to the way of this world where everyone jockeys for approval. I ask myself, and I'm asking everybody else, don't you get fed up with the rat race? Don't you get fed up with everyone running faster to get higher up the pile? And yet, interesting, we weren't built to be the center of our own worlds anyway. I think Paul gets it when he says this: whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Jesus. That's from Philippians 3. He talks about whenever he's lost or whatever accomplishments he had, he couldn't care less as long as he knew Jesus better. But today we love being great. We want to be great and successful and accomplished and awesome. We position ourselves for being successful. So we start looking around at others and comparing. We convince ourselves that God wants us to be amazing and awesome, but lasting joy will only come when God is at the center, not when we think we become powerful and influential, even when we think we're doing it in God's name. When our thoughts become consumed with ourselves, we forget how very much we need Jesus. We forget that we're called to follow him, that it won't be easy, that it is worthy to have a life worthy of the calling we've received. And he says, doesn't it, to be humble, gentle, patient, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. It's from Ephesians 4. Do we choose to make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace in our church, in our lives, in our work, in our families? Wow. I tell you, this humility, it's difficult at times. It really is difficult. But here's the goal. Here's one goal anyway. When we're finally able to meet together at Grapevine, to sing and worship together, to hug each other and to bless each other, to share and chat, we will be in a position simply to be able to encourage one another to get closer to Jesus. That's it. That's my goal really for the next season, or when we can get in there. Can we get to a time where our main goal and function is just to help every one of our neighbors, every one of us, just to get closer to Jesus? No great program, no great new way of doing things, just to draw nearer to the one who loves us. Shouldn't church be like that? So when we realize that we bought into the lie of our own greatness, and we make the shift into humility, we are following the example of Jesus. When we mimic these qualities, God is in his rightful place. And humility helps us let go of being awesome, covering up stuff, avoiding people getting too close. And you know, I've often thought about this, but I think getting up there on our own pedestals makes for miserable living anyway. You know, do we truly know the freedom that will come if we care little about what others think of us and what we think of ourselves? It's getting rid of all the stuff that we worry about. And you know, like I do, God is always asking us to do backward things anyway. You know, one of the things he says is humble yourself, apologize, make things right again. And when we do these things, we're often relieved. And maybe there is truth in the words that when we're weak, it's actually a good thing, because Christ's power is made more evident in us. So this is really about choosing to be humble. 2 Corinthians 12, 9-11. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Do you believe that? Do I believe it? I hope this is encouraging, even though it is challenging. Because if we can shed all this stuff off, we can just get on with getting closer to Jesus in whatever we do. And in the end, all this self-important stuff always self-implodes anyway. Yet with all the evidence stacked against it, achievement is still the most popular drug of our generation. There is a reason we don't want to hang around in hospitals or care homes. There's a reason we posture. There's a reason we purchase stuff. There's a reason why we buy things way beyond our means. We all want to be awesome, and we want everyone to know it. Even if Jesus is the only real awesome one. We're fighting that all the time. But there's an upside. There's an upside to all this. How am I supposed to be humble with them, whoever they are, when they're so hurtful or annoying or wrong? Well, Murray says this: true humility comes when we see ourselves to be nothing and consented to part with and cast away self to let God be all. Casting away ourselves means to put down our concerns and worries. It helps us then to have space to consider others, because we're not filling ourselves with us. And when we do that, we can see people as God sees them. And Spurgeon says this: your own spiritual beauty may be very much measured by what you can see in other people. And the follow-on from this is that we can show up for people in need and treat them as Jesus would. Do you know, even when I look at all this, I find it sort of releasing. It's sort of freeing. If we're less preoccupied with ourselves, striving to get what we need and want, always stressing about it, trying to make others to see how awesome we are, then it gives us freedom to focus on other things which bring us far more joy. Humility says this: not only do I see you, but I choose, note the word choose there again, to elevate your needs above mine. When we're not being consumed with our own selves, we tend to notice other people in the world, people we might be able to serve. We can see them with a fresh perspective. We see their fragility and their needs. So how are you with the people around you? How are you with people in Grapevine? Just this little local church. Remember, we started with that example of lashing out. And when we start to get down off our own high horses and think about others, we may recognize that we need to apologize and acknowledge our mishandling of the situation. and get in there and say, you know, will you please forgive me? Time to see things from their perspective. So I think it is true that real joy comes when we lay aside our power or our perceived power and rest in God's power. Joy comes when we put the emphasis on God's awesomeness, not our own. I think that's why some of us are finding it so hard that we can't meet, because a lot of what we do in the worship, in the singing, if you like, is really leaning in and praising God and laying ourselves down. Jenny Allen in the book says this. She says, my prayer is that we be utterly dependent upon God, that we'd seek him and find him and learn from him and lean into him, and that we'd be in this world as Jesus was, that we'd accept every invitation into humility, prizing each other's needs above our own, that we wouldn't despise that which will grow us up by reminding us to bow lower and lower still. And Murray says this finally. He says, he thinks every Christian passes through these two stages in their pursuit of humility. And it's written in an old language, but I hope you get the gist. Talking about a man. In the first, he fears and flees and seeks deliverance from all that can humble him. He prays for humility, at times very earnestly, but in his secret heart, he prays more, if not in word then in wish, to be kept from the very things that will make him humble. It has not yet become his joy and pleasure. He cannot say, most gladly do I glory in weakness, I take pleasure in whatever humbles me. But we can hope to reach the stage in which this will be the case, undoubtedly. And what will it be that brings us there? And he says this, that which brought Paul there, a new revelation of the Lord Jesus. That's what he's saying here. When we humble ourselves, put others first, seek God, then we get a new revelation of who Jesus is, and it brings us more joy. And there's less we have to strive for. I don't know if you agree, but I think that's such a freed up way of thinking about our circumstances and all the people around us. So perhaps my prayer is this: Father, help me choose the pleasure of humility today. Well, it's somewhere to start. It's somewhere to start. Just thanks for listening. Thanks for giving me the privilege to share with you each week in one way or another. I'd so look forward to being together with you all and worshipping and hugging and blessing. And I keep saying that the time will come soon. Keep praying, keep encouraging, keep ringing one another up, keep blessing, and just look for that time when we'll all be in that place, worshipping from the top of our heads down to the toes in our feet. Have a really good day. I'll catch you soon as I can. And big blessings from me.